Before we get started, I want to make an announcement. Week after next is National Older Adult Conference. How many of you have any of you been to that before? Okay. It's really a great program. The only problem is it's in North Carolina. It's about 550 miles away. And when you get there, you need to pay for your room and your board and so on, registration. But this year we have a special opportunity because the Brethren Homes help sponsor NOAC. They are giving us access to the whole program. So you'll be getting a notice about a link that you can use on your computer to link into and watch the program. But we'll also be projecting the program here in the chapel. So if you would like to, if you don't have a computer or you're not confident about that, come on down to the chapel. There's first thing in the morning, there's a worship service, and then that's followed by a Bible study. And then in the morning, there's some really great keynote speakers. In the afternoon or the evening, then there's a worship service again. So you'll get all that scheduled, but I want you to, it'll be on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of that week are most of the programs. There's also one Monday evening and Friday morning, but keep September 4 through 8, right? Okay. I'll turn it over to Grace.
Welcome to Oasis. I am Grace Voorheis. Today, I am completely out of my comfort zone. Yes, I can. I'm not a gifted writer. I've always been like Sergeant Friday on Dragnet. Just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. When I joined the memoir class under Jane Starner, I felt out of my league, but I persisted. Then Eileen Flory took over. Each session, we were given a suggested topic, but we were not limited to it. Today, I will share a few of my writings. A morning walk. Well, it's a warm, balmy summer day. Not too cold, not too hot. I wake up exhilarated after a refreshing night's rest. I bounce out of bed, ready to go. I love to walk before breakfast to enjoy the early morning air. My husband, Chuck, is already out on the lake fishing. As I leave my cottage this morning, I look around my place. The white daisies are dancing as they're embracing the foundation of the house with deep purple, gorgeous purple iris and yellow lemon lilies. I stroll down the street to see other summer flowers calling me to enjoy them. Then I turn to go out onto a rural road that's gravel to my feet. The berm is large enough so that I can walk on grass most of my journey. Grasses themselves are so many shades of green, from pale yellow green to dark, dark jade green. What a contrast. Here is a dairy farm. The cows are mooing, their udders swinging back and forth, anxious to be milked. I enjoy noticing several brands of cows, mostly light brown Jerseys, but a few Holsteins, white with black spots. Golden mustard pops its heads in fields where it is not appreciated, but it is beautiful. I wander by more farmland. Even the ditches are so different. One has a bit of water in it with plants to match. You know, those with long, reedy stems, cattails. Another ditch is filled with purple loosestrife, spiky flowers. Against the fence are bunches of baby breath with their tiny white flowers. Queen Anne's lace, tiger lilies are in abundance. It's an awesome day. I look upward at the soft, billowy clouds making pictures in the sky. The sky is so blue, it's a peaceful day. I come to the house where I have to be cautious. Will he come out today? Of course he will. The little dog comes running, barking and barking as he nips at my heels. He has nipped me once. So I try to find a stick to wave back and forth so he cannot make contact again. He doesn't respond to any attempts of friendliness. After all, he is protecting his home. But he doesn't need to protect the road out in front of his house, as he seems to think. I just don't agree with him. After this encounter on my way home, thinking of all the beauty I have enjoyed, I am blessed to enjoy life in rural America, especially Michigan. I'm anticipating now toast and coffee. Pockets. Pockets? What a dumb thing to write about. But think about it. Remember enjoying your little boy's jeans when you had to empty them before putting them in the washer? Depending on the excursions for the day, you might find a dead worm or almost a shiny pebble, a shell, a feather. As your son grew, the items may change, but each tells its own story of what your son treasured. Women's pockets used to be few and far between. After all, if you had one, you might look a little bit fat. And after all, women were supposed to be slim and sleek. Some even had pretend pockets sewn flat. Pockets were okay for your jackets, but not in blouses. I guess you're expected to carry your purse at all times. Which reminds me of an incident that happened several years when I was teaching. The teacher training session was going on that particular day. A group of us women sat around in a circle waiting for the resource teacher. We were a mixed group, tall and short, thin and fat, blonde, brunette, gray, white, all ages. We visited a little bit sultry, inconsequential conversations while waiting. We sat prim and neat, upright, or we might squirm and wiggle a bit. The door was finally opened by a 40-ish aged man who promptly took the remaining chair. After introducing ourselves, he proceeded to suggest ideas to improve our teaching of reading. He told us, It's not a problem to keep track of every child's progress if you use file cards one at a time. While speaking, he proceeded to take one card at a time out of his breast pocket and write down and a note or two and return it to his pocket. I looked up to see women looking around and around, patting their breasts, and we all ended up in a whirl of laughter. The speaker looked perplexed. After all, he was helping us be better teachers, right? But when he saw us patting our breasts and laughing, he just got up and left, thoroughly embarrassed. However, my mother did have a pocket on her breast. She did have a breast pocket. She sewed one on every one of her dresses. Why? My mother was deaf. She wore hearing aids. Remember, this is in the 40s or 50s. The hearing aids were attached with wires to the hearing aid about the size of a little larger than a pack of cards. As the wires were not very long, she needed the pocket. I found it helped me to wear polyester jackets at school with pockets over my clothes in school. That way, I had a place for some tissues or a pad and pencil near at hand. It was not very fashionable, but it was practical. Pockets tell their own story. We need to think and appreciate the need for them. April was always poem month in memoir class. We were trying all kinds of poems, haiku, limericks, prose, couplets. So I'll read my vacation poem in couplets. The kids wanted more. Fishing had become a bore. Into the car we entered. Eastward we were centered. Scenery changed every day. June resplendent on the way. We tended, rain or shine, tents unfolded among the pine. Hills were laden with new leaves. Gettysburg was bound to please. We erected our tent. To sleep we were bent. But flu came with a flurry. No reason now to hurry. Each took his turn to lie abed. Mom kept the others fed. Mom escaped with a well to Civil War areas to dwell. To the museum we sailed, up the hills and around we prevailed. A tour guide was hired. Larry became so inspired, he depicted 2 Civil War scenes in action. He aced the school art competition. Every day was a new trip, repeating those most appropriate. After a week of being sick, we were ready for another trip. On our way to Washington, D.C., we oohed and ahed, so much to see. But that's another day, another story to display. Dementia. The phone rings. It's my sister, Mary. What do we do? What should we do? Now, I'm supposed to be the one with all the answers. It's June, school's over. I stopped. Well, I could go up to Beaverton. I'll go up to Beaverton and check out and see how things are. Oh, that'd be great. I hang up. I talk it over with Chuck. He wasn't too enthused, but that was normal. Anything I did wasn't met with that much enthusiasm, but I began to pack. What would I need? I guess I'll find out. The next morning, I left the drive to drive the 100+ miles to Beaverton. We'd already moved to Hale to spend the summer. Beaverton was about halfway from Hale to Flint, so the trip would have been the same no matter where I came from. Hi, Mother. I come to visit you. Hello, she said with a question. How are you, Mother? I'm fine. Where's Chuck? He stayed home to fish. He likes to spend the day on the water. I think he breathes better there. He had emphysema. That's why he was on disability. Chuck always had a time breathing in Beaverton without air conditioning. It was noon, time for lunch. She didn't move from her chair. So I got up and checked the fridge. Nothing much there. I found some eggs and looked for a skillet. It was so burned, I had to clean it up. I checked for other pans. Most were burned. I looked for a towel and washcloth. I found some ragged ones in the drawer under the oven. Wow, what a fire hazard. After cleaning the pan, I made scrambled eggs and toast from old bread. I see what the score was. Mother had the beginnings of dementia. It must be. After eating and cleaning up, I went to the grocery and stocked up on necessities. Mother just sat there, apparently looking out into space. So I stayed and began to clean up. She had spread pine branches around the room. I wondered why, but I learned her friend would visit her with a dog who had fleas. When they left, some of the fleas remained. He was the one who had called Mary to tell her something was wrong with our mother. They had made a habit of calling each other each day just to check up on them. I fixed supper. Mother roused to eat it. Now, she lived in a 3-bedroom home, so I found an empty bed and checked the linen to make it with some fresh sheets. I found ones I had given her, still unopened. She still used the ones she made from grain sacks and sewed together. In time, I checked drawers. I found a drawer with flannel shirts for Dad, still in their packaging. He'd been gone 7 years. This was true of any gift we had given them. They were too good for them to use. Mother woke up and fixed breakfast the next morning, and we did visit a bit. I took a walk, and when I returned, she was puttering around again, not doing much. I read for a while. Lunchtime came. It seemed to be the pattern. She could fix one meal, but forgot any others. Soon came the query, why don't you go home? I don't need you. This again and again. I told her, when you can fix 2 meals at a time, I will go home. She couldn't. Mary would visit her once a week, so Mother enjoyed her visit. That time I would go back and spend the day with Chuck. Uh, my sister Fern came a few times, but she owned and operated a grocery store, so it was she couldn't leave easily. Days moved into months. I began to wonder what would I do when September came and I needed to go back to work. Mary told her maybe. Oh, but it worked out. When Mary visited in late August, Mother showed her a bruise that looked severe. She'd never told me anything about it. But Mary told her maybe she should come home with her and visit her doctor. That was agreeable with Mother, so Mary took her to her home. I closed up Mother's home and I went home. But that was not the ending. Mary's husband, Durwood, also had emphysema, as well as lung cancer. While Mary worked at the hospital, he was home alone with Mother all day, who repeated the same mantra over and over. You don't look sick. Why don't you take me home? I want to go home. Repetition after repetition takes a toll. Durwood died suddenly in November, near Thanksgiving. Now Mother lived with Chuck and I. I worked. Chuck was home with Mother. Again, the same mantra began. You don't look sick. Why don't you take me home? I want to go home. I saw it was wearing Chuck down, so I found a home care place with 3 other ladies with dementia, with their own bedrooms and a common living area. The family was separated from them and cared for them. But Mother began to run away, so I needed to find another facility. Beaverton Nursing Home was filled, but I found one near Mary in St. Louis, Michigan, and moved her there. By this time, Mother was at odds with me, so she embraced Mary, who visited her regularly. This worked out until Mary and Fern took a tour to Hawaii, returning to California, and visited Brother Paul. He was working, so they were left in suburbia without transportation. They called me and asked if they could visit us. Now, we lived in a 22-foot trailer in Apache Junction, Arizona. I figured they were there for the weekend, but they stayed and stayed. I was working part-time as a teacher aide, so I was gone 6 hours a day. When I came home, I took them various interesting places, but it began to wear thin. Chuck slept in the space above the hood. The girls slept in the 2 beds made from the dining benches. I slept on the floor. When I left for work, Mary went to a convenience store for coffee. Chuck went to the community hall, and I learned Fern felt she needed to sleep on more as she had diabetes. But first, she opened the blinds at 9:00, but I learned later that she began to watch TV and did not open them until 11. After 18 days, I finally told them they had to leave. It was not fair to Chuck at all, and it wasn't. They just used me. They found a place, but they stayed all winter, which meant that Mother had no visitors now. But we all did return home to Michigan for the summer, and we visited Mother each week. But she deteriorates. She had deteriorated so much, she began to not know us at most of the time. Mary sometimes went over and played hymns for her, and she did enjoy that. She lived 7 years in the St. Louis facility. She fell and broke her hip, but needed to stay in a wheelchair because of her dementia. One day in March, the nurses called me and told me Mother was spitting out her food and water. She did not want to live. I told the nurse, let her go. I told my sisters, and would you know, my sister Fern called and said, can't you make her, it's not convenient for me to come. Can't you make her do something? The next day, the nurse called and said, I can't help. I can't find a vein to do anything. Oh, I said, let her go. I wanted to go back to, to visit her, but Chuck didn't want me to leave him, and Mary and Fern did not go. So Mother died alone. We all flew back for the funeral in Beaverton and later to rest in Tobacco Township Cemetery, where Dad had been the caretaker for many years. I wept. The chemist. After finishing my college sophomore year, I was out of money. I needed to work for a year to replenish my stash. I lived with my parents in Beaverton, Michigan. There are not many jobs close to home, so I needed to look farther. 35 miles away was the town of Midland, home of Dow Chemical. So I decided to try my luck there. I drove to Midland. My mother accompanied me. As we neared the town, we didn't need to know anything, but our nose told us we were nearing because the smell was so acidic, so chemical. The town of Midland was overcast with just white from all the chemical smells. But I applied and I was accepted in the chemistry division. Now, after all, I had taken 1 year of chemistry under Dr. Harry Weimer at Manchester. My first job was a control worker testing methocel, a filler for your pills and other things. The hours were atrocious. Work 1 week on first shift with 2 days off, then 1 week on second shift with 2 days off, and finally the third shift with 2 days off and back to square one. Not much time for planning anything. Sleep was difficult. I was tired all the time. But I did learn to drink coffee. My friend Dora persuaded me that it was a social thing to do. So she doctored the coffee, both cream and sugar, and told me to drink it. I did. Dora kept me drinking it and that horrid stuff. I persisted until I could almost like it. She was my mentor during this growing up time, even though I was 20 years old. I was naive. I was a slow learner. A job opening was advertised for a day job. Organic chemistry was a requirement. I don't remember much about it, but I did enlisted in a class in organic chemistry, passed, and was hired. I worked with a real chemist. He made solutions, and I tested them on bits of cloth. This was the beginnings for permanent press. The room I worked in was glass enclosed, climate controlled. I washed, rinsed, dried, ironed these bits of cloth, and then ran various tests on them. Strength of material, weaknesses, endurance were all tested and recorded. I worked there until time to go back to college. My dad didn't want me to quit as I was making so much money, $1.17 an hour. I told him I really needed to go back, so I disobeyed him. If I didn't go now, I felt I might never. But November came, World War II was over, and the boys came home to replace the women at Dow. I wanted to go on to explain a little bit more. This section where I was in, it was a huge cavern place. Many sections were doing all kinds of experiments. Next to the section I was working on, the group was working on discovering saran wrap. If it was raining, when we left the workplace, we would grab a piece of this smelly, thick, opaque stuff, hold it over our heads as we went out to the checkout shanty outside the factory. We dropped this piece as we entered the bus to take us home. We were not to take anything we worked on with us. Secrecy was very, very important in these days. Buses took workers to Beaverton, Gladwin, Mount Pleasant, and other villages within 40 miles of Dow. I would like to close with other people's writings. Micah 6:4 says, "And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God?" And John Oxenham, "To every man there openeth a highway and a low, and every man decideth which way his soul shall go. The highway climbs the highway, and the low soul gropes the low, and in between on the misty flats the rest drift to and fro. But every man decideth which way his soul shall go." And James 1:22 says, "Be ye doers of the word and not hearers only." And I challenge each of you to reach beyond your comfort zone and live abundantly. Amen.